Guys, it's King with a Fear, and first off, if you're watching this when I just posted it and you're a subscriber, sorry I haven't posted for a while. I was kind of out of it. I felt like I was just gonna delete the channel. It was getting kind of boring, but I've kind of reawakened a passion because now I want to take it more seriously and I want to do edited what ifs. Like, like the what ifs that Noah What Ifs does, or King Majin does, or We the Celestial does. But I don't know an editing software that's like that I can put a picture on a background. Okay, like if you guys know any good editing softwares for me, please recommend them in the comments. And again, if the comments are disabled, just check again, like in the next like hour or so, because I don't know why YouTube does that. I say allow comments, but then they still restrict the comments, so I have to go to YouTube Studio and then block them from there. Anyway, again, comment down what ifs you want. This is a what if I actually kind of want to continue. So let's get it started. So how this is going to go is Deku would be born. Now Deku would have been born with a mark. This mark would be on his neck. And this mark would be just like the one Kimimaru had. Remember that. It's going to be important later in the story. Now, so to just clarify, Inko's quirk would be called bone density. She could basically change the density of her bones, which means she could basically like be shot by a bullet, and unless it didn't hit her vital organs, she would be okay. And Hasashi's quirk would just be body control. Would be body. His quirk would be called body. If you watch Black Clover, you know Dante's magic. It's sort of like that. So yeah, those two quirks mix and create this. So we actually start off this what if how normal things should go. Deku, I'm gonna start calling him Midoriya is in the quirk doctor. The doctor walks in with Midoriya's papers and he sits down. He says, "Hey kid, what do you want to be?" And Midoriya's like, "I want to be a hero, like All Might." And he'd say, "Well, with your quirk, maybe you can be." And Midoriya smiles. The doctor says, "We don't know what you call your quirk, but it looks like it has a mix of both of them. It looks like you have the ability to control your bones and maybe even move them out your body, since some of your bones weren't in the right place." He'd say, "Also, you can also control your density like your mother." Now, we examine this this mark on his neck. We think it's a birthmark. And Inko would say, "Okay, I was just worried." And she'd say, "Nothing to be worried about." He'd say, "Nothing to be worried about, man." Izuku would go to school. As he go to school, everybody would be like, "What's your quirk, Izuku?" As people would still be fawning over Bakugo since he got his quirk early. As Izuku would say, "Well, they didn't really explain it, but I want to call my quirk." Oh, I didn't get a name for my quirk, but I'm gonna call my quirk. How about bone, bone, bone manipulation? No, bone control. Now, if you don't know, there's a difference between manipulation and control. Okay, I'm I'm just saying. For example, never mind. But there's a difference between manipulation and control. So after that, they'd say, "Show us." Deku would say, He didn't really know how to, but he'd think bone, bone, bone. The first thing he'd normally think of would be his fingers. He wouldn't really know what to do, but he'd close his eyes. They say using your quirk is like just like breathing. So as Deku closed his eyes, he'd think about his finger bone. As his finger bone would start to stick out of his finger, everybody would be like, "Cool." Deku would be like, "Yeah, it is cool." While playing around, Deku would shoot the finger bone, cracking a glass. on the teacher's table. The teacher wouldn't be mad if I don't know, there were two teachers in that building, but the teachers would be, he, both of them would be kind of impressed. Everybody would start to hello around Midoriya and not Bakugo. This would kind of make Bakugo jealous. Bakugo didn't really like Midoriya. A year later, Midoriya had been practicing necessarily, and he'd be walking in the park after getting some ice cream. As he'd be walking in the park, he'd see Bakugo's friends as they were throwing dirt at a kid. Midoriya would step in front of them and say, "Stop, Bakugo, or else I'll have to stop you." He'd say, "Get out of my way, Deku." I mean, hold up. No, he'd say, "Get out of my way, Bones." I mean, that's gonna be his new nickname that, Bakugo calls him. He'd say, "Get out of my way, Bones." And Deku would be like, "I will, once you stop bullying this kid." So, Bakugo's goons would prepare to fight. Midoriya would say, "You can't take me on alone." As this would anger Bakugo. Bakugo would tell his goons to stay back. Bakugo would rush at Midoriya, and Midoriya would kind of be a little bit afraid. Bakugo would shoot multiple attacks. Midoriya's bones were hard, but he could still feel it through his skin. As Bakugo was going for one big attack, honestly, Bakugo, since he's a kid, but I'm gonna say, you know how Bakugo can push himself to do a giant explosion? One giant explosion as Kid Bakugo is the same as a normal explosion as Canon Bakugo. I just thought that'd be kind of cool. So as he'd charge up, he'd rush at Midoriya. Midoriya would put his hands in front of his face to prevent it. As it would hit him, Bakugo would back up as he'd be like, "What the heck?" As bones were sticking out of Midoriya's body, or his arm, more so say. Though they were coming out of his body too. They were coming out of his ribs too. He'd say, "What the heck, you freak?" Seeing this, seeing this, Midoriya would back up. Bakugo would rush again for another explosion. Midoriya would shoot some of his finger bones at Bakugo. He'd get hit in one of them, but he'd still be angry at Midoriya. At this point, Bakugo would be crying because of the pain, and he'd run to try to attack Midoriya. As he'd run to try to attack Midoriya, you know what would happen. Bakugo would go to attack Midoriya right in the face, as a bone would stick out right out of his neck, stabbing Bakugo right through the hand. Bakugo would cry and cry, and Midoriya would say, "What the heck?" As he would run away, as Bakugo would be hurt. Midoriya would run home explaining his mom what had just happened. They'd go to the quirk doctor again. The quirk doctor would examine Deku again, saying that he had bones coming out of his body. Now, the doctor would ask Deku if he could retract them. As Midoriya would say, "Yeah, I can retract them." And he'd say, "Well, the incident was bad, but you're just learning your quirk. New stuff will appear. It's okay." And that's what's gonna happen. Now we skip to canon, necessarily. That's Deku's in the... Now, Deku, he's still the nice Deku he is, but he doesn't... He's still the nice Deku he is, but he doesn't talk as much as normal. I mean, he barely talks in them. Actually, yeah, he barely talks in the main show. But anyway, so this would be after Bakugo was standing on the table, and Midori would say he wanted to go to UA too. Now, Bakugo would see this and slam his hands on Midori's desk, but Midori wouldn't fall out. Bakugo would say, "Why does someone like you want to go to UA?" And Midori would say, "Why does someone..." Midori would then say, "Why does someone like you want to go to UA? You're literally like the biggest bully in the entire school." And the classroom would be silent. As Baka would say that again? And Midoriya would say, well, prove my point again. As the teacher would break it up. After school, Baka would still explode Midoriya's journal. Midoriya would ask Baka what was the need of doing that. As Baka would say, whatever, and walk out. He'd get his journal, and he'd be mad that it was soaking wet, but it'd be okay. Midoriya would walk home, deciding to take a shortcut. He'd be attacked by a villain, a sledge villain. He'd be having a hard time breathing. Midoriya would unleash. Midoriya would then unleash bones like sticking out of his back, like a giant out of his back, like as it would just like like stick out of his back. Now this wouldn't really hurt the sledge villain that much, but it would give Midoriya more room to move since more of the sledge villain was occupied. Midoriya would jump out the way. As he jumped out the way, the sledge villain would say, "Wow, kid, you have an impressive quirk. That's going to be very useful down the line." Also to tell you, the top of Midoriya's hair is white. He'd be like, "Wow, kid, you have a very useful quirk." Midoriya would say, "Thanks." When, as he'd be doing this, a bone would stick out of his shoulder. Midoriya would pull it out. The bone would be sticking out of his shoulder necessarily. And Midoriya would wonder what that was doing. He tried to push it in, but it wasn't working. He'd realize that it was coming out, so Midoriya would just pull it out. He'd see it was a sword. He had never pulled swords out of his body, but it was okay. So, Midoriya, with the sword in hand, would run at the sledge villain and stab it right in the eye. Now, I feel like the sledge villain could regenerate the eye, but still, that would hurt. All Might would appear and basically Texas smash the sledge villain. And Midoriya would still get an autograph, but I don't think Midoriya would jump on All Might in this version. Okay, I don't think Midoriya would jump on All Might in this version. So after that, Midoriya would start training. He'd clean up a Dehiga beach using some of like the beach materials as like training for his he used some of the beach materials as training for his like swords and stuff. Midoriya would have also learned another thing that will become important later on. I mean, I'm still gonna do it in this episode. After that, the UA entrance exams would be there. Walking to school, Midoriya would get there as Bako would say, "Get on my way, Bony." And Midoriya wouldn't care. He'd just walk by Bakugo. After that, they would sit down and Ida would never talk to Midoriya because Midoriya wasn't really that big on Present Mike. After that, they would be in the training ground D as they were getting ready. Midoriya was stretching, cracking his knuckles. You know, everything you needed. As Midoriya was doing this, the doors would open. No one would run out as President Mike would say, "There's no countdowns in a real battle, go." Whereas Midoriya would go running. Midoriya was pretty fast. Not fast as Ida at this point, but he was like the second fastest person in the training ground besides Ida. Midoriya would rush and run. He'd see a robot. He'd pull out a bone sword as he would stab the robot right in its red eye. After stabbing the robot in its red eye, he would then see it power down. He would think maybe the eyes are like a weak point for one-pointers. Izuku would continue stabbing robots, destroying their engines. He would put his bone sword back in his shoulder as Midoriya was going to test out something he had been practicing. As 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 Midoriya's wrists would start to change and grow, bones would start to stick out like wrist bones. When as these bones would start to stick out like wrist bones, they would start to cover Midoriya's entire arm. Think about it like this. Imagine if an arm comes out your wrist and holds your holds your fist. Like basically put your other arm over your fist and hold it. That's what it looks like. It's like a big pair of knuckles. Like they're not that big, but they're like probably as big as a maybe half the size of a normal pillow, you know? That's how big they are. Half the size of a normal pillow. So Deku would say, let's test this out. He'd see a robot as he punched the robot. The robot would go flying like 2 meters, and it would then shut down because it was destroyed at that point. Yeah, Midoriya would say, whoa, this is powerful. Midoriya had discovered this technique, but he never used it against a moving object. So yeah, Midoriya, he kind of goaded at this point. He continued running around destroying robots left and right. Now, the 0 Point robot would emerge, and this would cause Midoriya to want to run away. But he'd see Uraraka there. Seeing Uraraka, Midoriya would rush over to her. He'd move the rubbish off of Uraraka, but the 0 Point robot would be a little bit too early. As the robot was about to step on Midoriya, alright, as the robot was about to step on Midoriya, Midoriya would push Uraraka out the way as he'd be getting stepped on. The robot would stop as, obviously, if you saw a student get stepped on, you would stop the test, and everybody would be wondering. Now, the weight of the robot would have still been on Midoriya because they stopped the robot while it was on Midoriya, and, somebody would be like, you idiots, move the robot first, as the robot would be moved backwards. Midoriya would get up this, like, as Midoriya would get up, like, half, his skin would have been dragged, and it would have been sagging, and Midoriya would actually been missing the skin on his forehead, and his chest would have been bloodied and everything, and you could see his bones. Everybody would be shocked, and one of them would even throw up, causing another person to throw up. Midoriya would be walking as he would fall down. Recovery Girl would immediately rush over and say, are you okay? He'd say, yeah. Now, Midoriya's skin was starting to grow back a little, and Recovery Girl would notice this, but she would still kiss Midoriya to heal the damage. And she'd end up healing all the damage. This is where the body stuff comes in. Now, Midoriya would get up, and he'd start walking again. Now, if you're wondering how come his vital organs weren't crushed, well, your heart is protected by your chest, and your vital organs are surrounded by your rib cage. So yeah, and Midoriya can nearly harden those objects in his body to whatever he wants. So yeah. So as this would happen, Midoriya would get up and walk to Uraraka and ask if she was okay. Uraraka would be stunned as she'd say yeah. The exam would be over and Midoriya would go to change and he'd leave. He didn't get a letter a week ago, as it would basically be explaining how Midoriya got in and how they gave UA a close scare, and that they want to see him at UA, especially since he did get first place. Midoriya would actually be happy and he'd be like, "Hey, Mom, I got in. Let's go." And this is where I'm gonna leave it off. Sorry, had to pause for a bit, but this is where I'm gonna leave it off. And hence I am again. Please comment if you know any good ugh. Please comment if you know any good editing softwares for me to use for my what ifs now. And I plan if you like I plan on destroying the what if Deku had the Omnitrix theory. I mean my what if video because I can do it. Like I can really that's like the one what if I'm confident I can fully do. But it's just like I already forgot the story. It's been too I I comment down if you want it. Maybe I'll do a redo of a redo. I'll just delete all the videos and just like post the new versions. But anyway, yeah, the next what if I want to post is what if Deku had Lucifero Part 2. So keep out for that. I hope you enjoy the video. I'm not gonna actually like and subscribe. That's your option. But if you thought the video was good, come on, at least like. Bye.